Today we're talking about money lessons not taught in school. So let's start off with tax. Most people understand that they need to pay tax. They want to pay less tax, but nobody really understands how the taxation system actually works. What type of tax sheltered accounts that the system and the government has created to benefit us as citizens. We're not taught what all the different sources of income are available to us that a person could have on their tax return. How can a person think about making more money and increasing their sources of income when they don't even know what types of income sources are available to them? Now, the average person doesn't need an in-depth understanding of the taxation system, but even if we just learned how to file a tax return in school, I think it would have been very helpful to the average student. If people were taught how personal tax, how corporate tax works, they would probably make very different life decisions for themselves. And what happens, we end up spending our whole lives paying 1/3 of our income tax to the taxman, which is fine, right? That's just the nature of it, but we don't realize what options we have. What can we do about it? What does it mean when different provinces and different states have different tax rates? And what can you do for yourself legally to reduce your tax burden? Second thing, what money actually is and how it's made. Never once, from grade kindergarten to grade 12, did a teacher sit down to explain how money is actually made in this world, what money actually is, how the banking system works. Money is a byproduct of value that a person adds to society and the number of people that they provide it for. Money is an exchange of value. The more people you impact, the bigger problems that you solve for society, the more money that you make. And then there's also the investing piece, which is growing the money. People go through life thinking that making money is a mystery. People think that, they get stressed out when they think about having to make more money. They think that making more money isn't something that's in their control. Learning how to set financial goals for yourself, speaking as an accountant and someone who does this professionally, and that's the only thing I've ever been paid to know how to do is to help people with money. But, learning how to set financial goals is the equivalent of, learning how to eat and breathe. In my opinion, everyone in the world needs to be financially literate to a certain degree to do well and to make good decisions for themselves. So just understanding the options of employment, self-employment, learning how to negotiate deals, learning how to negotiate with an employer, how to set goals for income, how to set goals for savings, how to set goals for your investments. How much of your paycheck are you supposed to save every month? And what happens when we don't learn these things is that we end up learning about money from our parents, which may or may not be a bad thing, depending on, your parents, their money habits, where they were born in the world, what their life story and their life journey was like. Our parents learned about money from their parents, which are your grandparents. Your grandparents learned about money from their great-grandparents. Again, none of these things are necessarily bad. Our parents want us to do well financially and make good decisions. Being able to learn it objectively really would benefit a lot of people. Lesson number 4 is how to evaluate career options. This is something that they definitely do not teach in high school, but most people, after they finish high school, they go off to, do more school, and what they choose and how they choose to apply themselves in that next phase ends up impacting them financially for the rest of their life. High school and the school system did not teach us how much each career can pay you. What is a reasonable growth of income for certain careers and professionals? This is incredibly important because the career that people choose in the earlier stages of life end up dictating their entire financial life. How are the children of our future supposed to make the right career choices and the right financial decisions if they don't even have half of the information that's required to make a decision? What ends up happening when we don't learn these things is that people end up not picking the right career. A person could be very smart intellectually, do very well in school, and accidentally and literally pick the wrong career path and accidentally apply themselves incorrectly because when they were younger, they weren't taught about career options. They weren't taught about negotiation. We do need to be passionate about something to a certain degree to be able to stick with it and be consistent with it for long enough. But passion is just one piece of the puzzle. There's also the practical element to it, which is the money-making element. And just because you're passionate at something doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna make a lot of money from it. The next lesson is just understanding what assets are, what liabilities are, what income is, and what expenses are. In order to protect yourself and make good decisions financially in life, it is so important to understand what is an asset, what makes an asset, what makes a liability, what is good debt, What is bad debt? How do you manage your income and your expenses? These are things that kids should learn and understand. They're very, very important. I think teenagers and young adults would be so much better off if they had learned these things in school. What happens when teenagers, young adults, and children learn about these things at an early age is that they end up thinking differently about money because they understand the basics, and they end up making better decisions for themselves just because they're more financially literate and they have more information available to them. Next is budgeting. Some people hear budgeting and they get scared because maybe they're allergic to numbers, but budgeting really is just understanding cash inflows and cash outflows. And the art of budgeting is basically to make sure that money out does not exceed money in. Understanding how to budget expenses at the individual level is one of the most important, financial literacy basics that a person has to go through. And because the school system didn't teach it to us, people have to learn it through the school of hard knocks. It would have been good if the school system had taught us how to plan for bigger purchases in life, how to save up for a house. How much money should we spend on a down payment? How much money should we spend on groceries every month? What's a reasonable amount of money to spend on vacation every year? And what happens when people don't learn how to budget is that most people end up overspending. Next is debt management. So a lot of people, when they hear debt, they automatically think debt is bad. Debt is not always necessarily bad. There are some cases where debt can be good. The question is, what do you do with debt? What do you do when you're in debt? How do you manage your debts? What actually constitutes as good debt and bad debt? How can debt actually be used as leverage to make money for us? And if you are in debt, whatever situation you're in, student loans, car loans, mortgage, credit card debt, how do you have a plan to get out of debt? What happens when the school system doesn't teach us about debt is that people get into debt. Okay, life happens, people get into debt, and they're embarrassed to talk about it, which can be really hard of a situation to get out of if you don't have a plan for yourself, you don't have someone to talk to get out of a debt situation. Next is investing basics, which basically rides off of, managing your cash flow. Now that you have some savings in your account, what do you do with that money? I remember taking an upper level finance course when I was in university, and all I remember was a lot of theory and formulas and calculations. They teach so much theory in school that just because a person has learned all the theory doesn't mean that they now know how to invest the money. Investing is very much a practical skill that you have to do and kind of learn from your own mistakes. And a big part of it is also your emotions and understanding how to make unemotional, logical decisions. Even in upper level finance, it was all just theory, very little information that could actually be applied to reality. And what happens when people aren't taught the basics of investing is that, they either don't have money to invest because they also weren't taught budgeting. They pick bad investments, or they make emotional decisions, not realizing that emotions play a big part of investing. They don't know how to invest in things. And what happens is that people can get scammed from investment opportunities because they don't know what is a real investment opportunity and what is not. Next is the basics of business education. Now, if there were more people that understood business education, then there would be more entrepreneurs in today's world. And I'm all for entrepreneurship and very supportive of young entrepreneurs. But a lot of them are not taught in school how business actually works. Business at its very core is a game of margins and cash flow. If you don't have margin on your products or services, then you don't have a business. If you don't have cash flow, or you have negative cash flow, then eventually you will not have a business either. These are really important concepts that young people should be taught and would add so much value to young people's lives if they learn these things in school, because it would allow them to make different decisions. It would allow them to think differently, and just understanding the basics of economics, of how the market works, supply and demand. A part of this is also understanding how to read financial statements, how to read a balance sheet or an income statement. What is a balance sheet and an income statement? If you're watching this today and you are in business, it is so critically important to hire a good CFO or a good controller that can guide you through these things. I remember in the book Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, the guy who started Nike, he said that the two most important hires that he made that helped Nike become the company that it is today. If you've read the book Shoe Dog, you'll know it's like an amazing, beautiful story. But the two most important hires that he made in his business early on was the CPA and the lawyer. 90% of businesses end up failing, possibly because of financial literacy, not because it was a bad business idea or because execution was poor. It could just be because they didn't know how to make decisions based on data. So basic business financial literacy is super important because it's going to help shape the entrepreneurs of tomorrow, which basically ends up shaping how society functions overall. The last thing I want to touch briefly on and not get super in depth to is just understanding consumer rights and what happens when you get into financial agreements, contracts, leases, or loans. As individuals going through life, we make big purchases, big investments, and big decisions. And if you don't really understand what your options are when it comes to, understanding agreements, what it actually means to even enter into a lease. For example, a car lease, you go to the dealership, they print a 30-page document and the sales guy gets you to sign on the very last page. And, there's all these numbers, very complex numbers and calculations that they put onto the paper. And sometimes in that spirit of emotion, people end up signing the lease and not realizing that they're now tied into, a 4-year financial commitment that might have not been the best decision. We can end up making bad decisions. We can end up, paying more fees than we should. So understanding risks, how to evaluate risks against your own risk tolerance, understanding what your risk tolerance even is. If you guys like this video today, hit that like button. Let me know down in the comments below what lessons that you think that school didn't teach you that you would have wanted to know when you were younger. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Until next time.